Hi, SEACOM. It's good to be here. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matthew Skelton. I'm the co-author of the book Team Topologies, and I'd just like to give you a bit of an introduction to this whole session, the whole sessions today. So my background is as a software developer, system architect. I've been technical director of an agency. I've organized conferences, all sorts of things. These days, I spend most of my time helping organizations to become more successful at software delivery. Lots of different dimensions. The book Team Topologies that I mentioned, which is this one here. So this one came out in September 2019. It's published by IT Revolution, the home of books like Accelerate, Project to Product, Phoenix Project, DevOps Handbook, and so on. It's a great family of books. Pretty much any book from this family is worthwhile reading. Team Topologies as a book has been described as innovative tools and concepts for structuring the next generation digital operating model. That was from 𝒗𝒊𝒅𝒆𝒐, who's principal analyst at Forrester Research. Let me give you a really quick overview of Team Topologies if you're completely new to it, or just as a refresher. We are trying to organize our teams for software delivery in the context of a fast flow of change. A rapid flow of change. So we're trying to set up our teams and so on, so they have the capability of deploying multiple times a day into the production environment and getting feedback very, very quickly. So if we want a fast flow of change and rapid feedback, we should not have any handoffs in the way to production. We want a single team to own all of the changes in the software as it goes towards production, and they should own that software in production. They should effectively, some people call it you build it, you run it. And that type of team is our kind of foundation starting point. That's called what we call a Streamlined Team, shown in yellow in this diagram here. They have end-to-end responsibility for a particular product or service or slice of the business domain, something like that. And because there are no handoffs, because they have end-to-end ownership, responsibility of that thing, and they run it in production, they get very fast flow of change and very rapid feedback to enable them to course correct really quickly. The other three types of teams that we think are needed for modern software delivery are kind of supporting these streamlined teams. An enabling team is a team of experts that can help a streamlined team to bridge a capability gap, to migrate from one technology to another, to learn something new, and so on. But the enabling team doesn't itself own any software. It's there in a facilitating way as experts to help this streamlined team. And typically they'll only help them for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, certainly not for many months. So it's a temporary interaction. We've also got a complicated subsystem team, which is kind of an optional type of team. Sometimes when we're building some software, there's some aspect of it which is really involved, needs complicated mathematics, maybe some advanced kind of awareness of maths or processing or some kind of complicated logic. And in which case, it's not reasonable to expect a streamlined team to have that kind of capability. In which case we might bring it into a complicated subsystem team. Some examples, some difficult accounting ledger calculations, some video, perhaps a video codec, so video processing might sit in there, something to do with maybe some specialized kind of audit or tracking or something like that, where it needs a high degree of specialism. But generally speaking, we try and keep most work inside streamlined teams. And then finally, we've got the fourth type of team, which is what we call a platform team in blue at the bottom of the diagram. And the principle there is that these streamlined teams should have end-to-end ownership. They should be substantially independent. And then, therefore, these teams need to have a mix of skills. But if a streamlined team takes on too many things, too much stuff, if you like, in order to remain independent, if it takes on too much stuff, eventually it takes on so much that it starts to slow down delivery because they're having to worry about lots of undifferentiated lower level aspects, things like infrastructure or data or security, something like that, things which are not really related to the business domain, in which case we might get value from having some of those aspects, some of those non-differentiating aspects, data, infrastructure, security, so on, inside a platform. But the platform has to be measured on how well they accelerate the delivery of value in the streamlined teams. Very different from platforms of the past. So we think there are only really 4 types of team needed, but it's important for us to distinguish these types of team. It's not just enough to have different kinds of team, though. Like any kind of system, in this case, we've got a socio-technical system, a lot of the behavior emerges from how different bits of the system interact. And that's why we have what we call team interaction modes. And we think there are 3 important team interaction modes. Collaboration, 2 teams working together for a defined period of time to achieve a specific outcome. So collaboration is quite expensive. It slows down delivery, but it can be valuable because it helps you improve boundaries, it helps you improve an API, it helps you improve the focus of what you're doing, it helps you discover whether you need to build something or whether you can just use something else. So we realize that collaboration is costly, but potentially valuable. And so we're expecting to collaborate 2 teams to collaborate perhaps for a few weeks and not more. Certainly we should not expect really ongoing collaboration, apart from in a very few specific circumstances. Now, contrast that with X as a service, where 1 team is providing something and 1 team is consuming something as a service. If we've got the boundary right, if the boundary is a good boundary there, then this should scale really well. It should feel really friction-free. It should be very easy for 1 team to provide and consume that thing as a service. And potentially, the providing team can provide this service to multiple teams who are consuming it. Because it's very friction-free, it requires very little kind of interaction to make it work. Now, that's if we've found a good boundary or a good kind of definition around the thing we're providing. And that can continue for an indefinite period of time. That can continue for many, many months or even years, providing that service. And then finally, we've got facilitating, which is where 1 team is helping another team to increase its capabilities, to discover something, to migrate some technology, to understand a new practice or way of working, something like that. So we've got collaboration and facilitating, which are temporary interactions, team interactions, which should only last for a short period of time, perhaps days or weeks. And then X as a service, which is an interaction which, if it's in a good place, if it's at a good boundary point, can potentially last for a long period of time. We can put these together, the combination of the types of team and the team interactions, into a diagram that might look a little bit like this. This is a diagram which is a snapshot of a very small part of an organization at 1 point in time. It's not a permanent design for an organization. It's a snapshot in time of something happening. And crucially, we have a flow of change going from left to right across the diagram. And that indicates why the Streamlined Team, the yellow shapes, are quite long, because there's a flow of change going from kind of the start of working on that thing to that thing is now working in production. That's why the shape is long like that. They've got end-to-end responsibility for that flow of change. This particular diagram is showing we've got 2 Streamlined teams in yellow. We've got a platform team at the bottom in blue. We've got a complicated subsystem team in orange towards the middle of the diagram. And we've also got an enabling team towards the top right. So what's happening here? The Streamlined team at the top of the diagram in yellow is working on some product or feature. They're currently receiving some facilitation from an enabling team. Maybe they're helping them to move from one cloud provider to another, or they're helping to change database or something, or adopt some new technology. They're getting some facilitation. So the enabling team is kind of experts, sort of mentoring and sort of teaching, helping that team to understand how to do it. So they'll have a particular expectation about what that will feel like when they work with the enabling team. Contrast that with the fact that the Streamlined team at the top is currently collaborating with a complicated subsystem team. What does that mean? Right now, it means that perhaps they're trying to define a new interface, a new API, a new feature of this complicated subsystem, and they're working closely together to make it happen. Now, at the same time, we can see the complicated subsystem in orange is providing something as a service to the Streamlined team in the middle of the diagram. So that means that the nature of the interaction with the second Streamlined team is very different compared to collaboration. If you're providing something as a service, it should feel very friction-free, but very straightforward to provide that as a service. And likewise, the Streamlined team should be able to consume that complicated subsystem component or service in a straightforward way. Streamlined Team, and towards the bottom of the diagram there, is also consuming some kind of services from the platform too. And again, it should feel very straightforward for that second Streamlined Team. The key thing here, this is a snapshot. It's not a permanent design. This is a snapshot of a way of working at a particular point in time, depending on what the teams are trying to achieve. So this Team Topologies is an adaptive, ongoing adaptive model that helps us to set some expectations about what teams can and should be doing and whether the boundaries are effective right now. They may have been effective in the past. Are they still effective now? It helps us to listen for situations where we need to change those boundaries again. There's a whole set of other things that Team Topologies also looks at. So we've looked at the 4 fundamental topologies. We looked at the team interaction modes, but it also looks at things called Team API. We look at Conway's law, which is this socio-technical mirroring, which tends to occur when we're building systems. Team Topologies provides an approach to organizational sensing. It helps the organization to sense its way in the environment, to be more aware of its surroundings, both inside the organization and externally. We fundamentally take a kind of team-first approach that enables us to evolve how the teams interrelate on an ongoing basis. You can think of Team Topologies as something like an operating model generator, something that helps you to generate your operating model for your organization. You could call it a domain-specific language, a DSL for organization design. It's that kind of thing. It helps with patterns to help thinking about what we're doing and how we should go about doing it. So a few things about Team Topologies seem to work well. Team Topologies provides a shared language. It provides some common patterns and, crucially, some operating constraints. And it helps organizations to explore the solution search space by putting these things in place. Some really clear language, but actually some constraints on kind of behavior and ways of kind of thinking and acting, which actually help the organization to explore how it wants to approach a particular problem. So we talked about these well-defined concepts in clear language. It was actually 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 who suggested that Team Topologies is a domain-specific language for organization design. I think it's kind of a nice phrase because domain-specific language, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of like a computer language which has very specific kind of words and phrases and ways of representing something. And effectively, that's what you can see that we've come up with Team Topologies. Another example, Kathy Keating is an experienced CTO in the United States, and she tweeted recently, "So thankful today for the book Team Topologies. It gave me just the framework I needed to build a really clear operational growth plan." And a quotation here from a client of ours in one of the government, in the government sector, one of the governments in Europe. "Thank you again for the workshop in January. The long-term effect has been remarkable. It has helped us to agree on a common vocabulary for describing teams, and it's been adopted as the natural successor of Accelerate. Accelerate being one of the books that IT Revolution publishes too." There's a solid engineering and socio-technical foundation behind Team Topologies, and that's deliberate. What we tend to find is that engineers and architects inside an organization really get it. They really appreciate the solid foundations there, and so we tend to find that people advocate for Team Topologies from the ground up because they can see the solid foundations that we use in the book. There's some nice overlap between Team Topologies and domain-driven design, DDD, and that's deliberate. We ourselves are inspired by aspects of DDD when we were writing the book. One particularly nice tool in the space is called core domain charts. It's from a group on GitHub who calls themselves DDD Crew. And these core domain charts help to visualize the strategic importance of each kind of subdomain or business capability in your organization. It helps you make some useful decisions. Not going to go into it today, but this approach of core domain charts has been influenced by Team Topologies in terms of some of the interaction modes and types of team. Interestingly, there's a combination here of Team Topologies, domain-driven design, and Wardley maps, which is starting to emerge, and several organizations are finding this useful. Leading the charge here is Susanna Kaiser, who's a former CTO at a SaaS company, moving from monolith to microservices. And she has an amazing talk where she goes through how these three techniques, Team Topologies, domain-driven design, and Wardley maps, can actually come together and really help to inform your kind of organizational awareness, the landscape, what technology choices you should make, and how the team should be arranged to make that happen. So you can find that online and look out for further talks from Susanna. One of the concepts that we introduced in the book was called Team API. And the Team API, so API means application programming interface. This is a very technical term that's normally applied to software, but we're applying it to a team. So it's the kind of definition of how to interact with our team from the outside. And we can include all sorts of things in there. It's like a specification, if you like. It might be a wiki page, just might be that, but we list a whole load of stuff that relates to our team. What do we produce? What kind of versioning approaches do we have? What kind of practices and principles are in place for us? How to contact us? How do we like to communicate with other people, and so on? And there's some examples online. If you're interested, if you search our GitHub repository, you'll find some stuff. One of the things that we strongly recommended in the book was product management for internal platforms. Now, it's not easy. Lots of organizations are do find challenges with that, because certainly historically, traditional infrastructure platforms were not really managed like a product. They were managed more like an assembly of technology. And we need to move towards this model of using product management techniques internally for our internal platform, because that's how we can sense what the right thing is to build and how we can treat our customers properly, our customers being the internal development team, Streamlined Teams who are using the platform. Our starting point for this really is that a platform should be a curated experience for engineers. It's not about technology fundamentally. It's about the experience that we're providing to engineers who are using the platform to build and run modern software services. And this is quite a new kind of standpoint, or a new position, if you like, a new way of looking at an internal platform compared to platforms of the past. So that's a really, really quick overview. Just give you a few insights into some of the Team Topologies ideas and things that seem to be working well. I'm super excited today to be able to showcase 3 organizations who are using some Team Topologies ideas in the way they work. So first, we'll hear from professional services company CROZ, so how they use the platform principles from Team Topologies to create and evolve their platform teams for customers, using principles like platform as a product, thinnest viable platform, team cognitive load, and fast flow. PureGym is the UK's largest gym operator. We'll hear how Team Topologies helped PureGym to move safely away from a monolithic code base with slow and painful releases to a more loosely coupled business responsive architecture that set the foundations for sustainable growth and improve staff morale. And from uSwitch, we'll hear details of the socio-technical principles involved in modern software delivery, autonomous, loosely coupled teams, together with the evolution of a supporting platform that evolved to meet the needs of those streamlined teams without forcing any team to use the platform. It's so great to be able to have these kind of case studies and have the people behind them share their own experience in their own words. All 3, you can find case studies on our website at teamtopologies.com/examples. So you can kind of read the background to those in there. But the information we hear today is providing something on top of that, including some more recent experience since the case studies were published. So please enjoy learning from the speakers next from the case studies, and thank you for joining the session today.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivan Krnic from CROZ, and today I will be sharing our experience in implementing Team Topologies approach and building a successful platform team. If this experience is interesting to you and you want to hear more, please don't hesitate to reach me on Twitter and subscribe to 0800 DevOps newsletter, because many of the ideas that I will be sharing in this talk I also covered there. Just to give you a bit of a context. So what is CROZ? CROZ is a professional services company, 300 people strong, and for 3 times in a row, we were shortlisted on Deloitte's Technology Fast list. In essence, what we do is we help our clients reach their business goals by helping them leverage new technologies, cloud-native development, DevOps practices, complex integrations, data science, and we help them increase their business agility. Since we doubled in size, we understood that teams were the only organizational structure that could help us to the next step. And that's why all of our teams were cross-functional with end-to-end ownership of functionalities and delivery process and infrastructure. This means that all of our teams had all necessary skills and knowledge to deliver the functionalities, but also to operate the infrastructure that they needed. So, for example, when a cross-functional team needs a new runtime environment, a special team called internal IT team would provision clean virtual machines, and those cross-functional teams would then install and further maintain all necessary middleware, such as application server, databases, and integration middleware. So these teams were always in full control over their tech and over their infrastructure. But then cloud native happened with all of its upsides, such as cloud environment, scalability, decoupling, that led to better automation tools, which further led to shorter feedback loops, which are all great things. But cloud native brought us also some downsides, huge technical complexity, proliferation of technologies. It needed a different development paradigm and different organizational setup and different organizational culture. And we noticed that the net result of cloud native applying to our organization was that teams, our cross-functional teams, couldn't anymore keep tabs on every moving part in this new technology stack. It simply became too difficult for them and too technology complex to track every change in the technology. And right about that time, I was listening to a book called Team Topologies by Matthew and Manuel and heard some of the great ideas that I thought that could help us in this situation. And the concept that stuck with me the most and that I believe was the most useful for us was the concept of a platform team. So in essence, if we have stream-aligned teams that are delivering value to the end users, let's not overburden these stream-aligned teams with additional cognitive load of figuring out the technology and dealing with the underlying technology that is getting more and more complex every day. Let's build a platform and let's provide this platform as a service to these stream-aligned teams. This way, stream-aligned teams can focus on what they do best, and that is deliver value to the end users, and let platform team deal with the platform and maintain it further and evolve it as time goes by. And this is the concept that we implemented in CROZ and that helped us a lot. By doing this, we basically splitted the cognitive load between stream-aligned teams that continue to deliver functionalities to the end user and the platform team that was building the platform and providing it as a service to all other teams. And when we talk about platform, there is always this question of what a platform really is. And there is no one single right definition. But I really like this Matthew's definition that a platform is a curated experience for engineers. Basically, everything that can make life easier for developers. At CROZ, our platform is Kubernetes-based runtime with some additional capabilities in terms of security, observability, build and release, and Q&A. We also have additional self-service capabilities in order to remove the dependencies to the platform team. So whenever stream-aligned teams need something from the platform, the best scenario is to get it on their own through self-service portal instead of pinging the platform team. Another interesting concept from the book was the concept of enabling teams. So enabling teams increase organizational capabilities by doing R&D and introducing new technology in a controlled fashion to the rest of the organization. They also upgrade team competencies, and they even suggest some changes to the platform that if that can improve the organization, the whole organization. So in CROZ, we have several types of enabling teams. We have, for example, transient enabling teams, like, for example, a team that was spun off purely to check out Groovy and Grails as a technology and evaluate it and try to figure out, is this a good fit for us? And once this team figured out the technology and disseminated this knowledge throughout the organization, this team was basically dismissed. We also have stable and permanent enabling teams, such as the one that we call the incubator. And the goal of the incubator is to continuously evaluate technologies, and when they see something that is fit for our organization, then they gradually introduce it to the organization. Another important goal of incubator as enabling team is to also onboard new people to this new technology. We also figure out along the way that our platform team is also acting as an enabling team in terms of upgrading other teams' competencies, in terms of automation and applying other technical practices in the development process. For a long time, the evolution of our platform was driven from two directions. So one direction is top-down direction, and it is driven by Streamline Teams. So whenever Streamline Teams see something that could be improved on the platform and that could make their lives easier, then they would suggest it, and the platform team would include that in the platform. There is also this other approach, bottom-up approach, where these changes to the platform are triggered by the platform team, which makes sense because platform team built the platform, they live with it, they maintain it, and they see the weak spots, and they can suggest some changes to the platform that could make it more resilient and more useful. This bottom-up approach is super useful, but is also super dangerous, as we also learned along the way. We had this situation where platform team did a change on the platform. More specifically, they made sealed secrets mandatory because in the end, this is something that made the whole platform more secure. But they didn't talk to Streamline Teams, and they weren't aware that that change for Streamline Teams did a lot of problems. So something that took them initially an hour to do, it took them now more than 3 days to do it. And they really made life more difficult to Streamline Teams instead of easier. And one thing that we failed here, and it is a good lesson learned for all other organizations, is we failed to treat the platform as a product. Our platform team forgot to ask Streamline Teams what kind of influence would this change have on them. They forgot to ask themselves who are they building the platform for and who are their personas, their users. So we understood that it came naturally for us to apply product management principles when we are building some kind of web application, but it didn't come to us naturally when we were building the platform. And it was something that we had to do consciously to apply these product management principles to the platform as well. So how to do that? We had to change the dynamics in the organization. We had to change this dynamic of having two teams triggering changes to the platform from two directions. And we wanted to change this to having two teams talking to each other and figuring out together what is the best for the platform. And some of the mechanisms that helped us a lot in doing this were obviously having platform team talk directly to their users, to other Streamline teams. We also instituted community of practice where knowledge and experience was shared. We also have these events, technical events called Tech Thursdays and Flash News. One of them, the goal of Tech Thursday is to disseminate knowledge about technical novelties. And the other one, Flash News, its goal is to reveal and share platform roadmap for the next couple of weeks or months. so everybody in the organization is aligned with this roadmap. One thing that also helped us a lot is introducing weekly team synchronization meetings of a platform team. This gave us a solid fixed point in week where we had time to talk to each other and to agree what we will do the next week and figure out how this roadmap will be implemented. Throughout this experience, I learned that platform is great, platform helps, but it is not a silver bullet. And it didn't help us solve problems like, for example, maintaining long-living products over time or retaining vintage skills in the team, developing new engineering skills, and what to do with team member turnover. So none of these problems is solved with the platform. Rather, this is where the organization and the leadership kicks in. And we rely heavily on teamwork here. I'm sure many of you will recognize this machine on the slide. And I can tell you that some of the prettiest and most reliable houses I've seen were built in this year, in 2021, using this old machine. So it's not about fancy tools. It is about vision, skills, principles, craftsmanship, and the team you're building it with. This is the most important lesson for us. So what are the results of our, let's call it, experiment of implementing Team Topologies approach to our organization? So we got a blueprint of how our teams should be structured. We increased collaboration and knowledge sharing. Splitting the cognitive load relieved much of the pressure from the Streamlined Teams, and they could finally focus on what they do best, and that is deliver value to the end users. Platform served us as a catalyst for change. A lot of new technical practices were introduced, and what is more important, standardized across the organization, and we got increased engagement among people. We won't stop here. So what we'll do next, we will further improve self-service capabilities to even more reduce this dependency toward platform team. We intend to automate further project resource governance. We want to drive new technology and capabilities through the platform, and we want to find new spaces for improvements by implementing value stream management tool and connecting existing portfolio management process with delivery metrics to better tune this flow. I can say that thinking in terms of 4 fundamental team topologies and interactions mode really helped us clear up some ambiguities around roles and responsibilities in the delivery process. This enabled teams to focus on what they do and love and do the best, and it is motivating them to further build their skills. It also made the role of every team member in the delivery process more transparent, and I can say that no other past initiative produced such engagement among people. And we find this approach, Team Topologies approach, instrumental to all of our further future improvement initiatives. Thanks.
Hi, we're here today to talk about Team Topologies at PureGym. My name is John Kilmister, and I'm currently a Principal Software Architect at PureGym.
Hi, I'm Rich Allen. I'm Head of Consulting at Conjuro Solutions.
So before we dive into Team Topologies at PureGym, a brief background on who PureGym are. The company launched back in 2009, and we currently stand at over 280 gyms in the UK and just over 1 million members. And that makes us the largest gym operator in the UK. IT at PureGym really came in 2015. That's when I joined. And our journey has continued from that point onwards. And today we'll cover that journey from 2015 through to 2020. Over that time, we've had a huge growth in members and really focused on an online first experience through our join process, bookings, payments, and various other bits and pieces. When we started back in 2015, we had less than 10 engineers. And when we had 10 engineers, we would create small project teams. They would go away, complete a project that would take no more than a month. Once that project was over, they would disband. A BAU team would pick up any bugs, issues, or various other bits and pieces. And the people in that project team would form new project teams to tackle new things. While this worked, at a small scale. In time, we would see that it would have challenges. During this time, we did continue to use modern development practices, though, with behavior-driven design, development, continuous integration, monitoring, logging, and we were still able to do continuous deployment over eight deploys a day. It quickly grew to 15 people, and we just scaled out this approach. It'd been quite successful up until this point, so we just added in more project teams. However, as we did this, the entire solution was getting bigger and the cognitive load was becoming quite large. In 2019, we got to 40 engineers. The company was growing at speed, and so was the IT department. And these handovers to the BAU team, which had now also grown in size, were becoming harder and harder to do. When bugs and issues were raised, the BAU team would have to start researching the product, trying to get it running, working out where the issue was before tackling actually fixing it. And this led to long lead times on fixing small issues and BAU tasks and things like that. The project teams were tackling more and more complex projects. As the system got more complex, so did the individual projects. After the project teams disbanded, when we did another project later on a similar topic, then you didn't necessarily have the same people and everybody had to skill up again. So the lead times on the projects were also starting to get longer. And there was a lack of ownership on these individual parts of the entire solution. The software mirrored this as well. We had a single repository with a few large projects in, and with 40 engineers all committing to that same repository, trying to deploy that same code base multiple times a day, we started to get contention. So short-lived project teams with handovers to BAU wasn't that scalable in the end. So how could we change this? And that's when Team Topologies came along in September 2019. We thought about the ideas and used various other terms to talk about the challenges that we had around cognitive load, over handovers, over ownership. However, with Team Topologies, we could actually verbalize this and actually come up with a strategy to tackle the problems that we saw.
So as John mentioned, in September 2019, the Team Topologies book was published. And what we found was that this really provided the terminology that we required to articulate how we felt the software delivery side of the organization needed to change. It basically helped us to clarify our suspicions about what was true and where we weren't really optimized for flow of change. And ultimately, instead of having our existing team structure, where we had lots of handovers between the project teams and the BAU teams, we really wanted to look at how we could move towards more longer-lived streamlined teams that took ownership of that code and really aimed to adopt a you build it, you run it type of attitude. So how did Team Topologies really help us with that? Well, in order to break the monolith, we really needed to look at all the different areas or domains within the site. And we wanted to look at different ways in which we might be able to break that up. So this is where we refer to the Team Topologies fracture planes. And really the goal here was to help the teams to become more long-lived and increase their ownership over their particular code base, allowing them to become more autonomous. But the challenge really was deciding which teams owned what and how many things each team should own. Overall, the process to break that down and really analyze that probably took around 3 months to get buy-in from the wider business and adopt the approach. So we moved forward by redefining the teams, and ultimately, instead of the big monolith, we used fracture planes such as change cadence and risk and regulatory compliance, with a core focus on reducing the cognitive load and creating more autonomous teams. ultimately, we came up with the concept of streamlined teams, such as the retention team, which owned areas that were focused around when a visitor becomes a member of the gym, the acquisition team that owned kind of the process of bringing people on board, such as the join process, payments team, etc. We also had an in-gym experience team, and each of these teams would have a key stakeholder with much clearer business goals, and ultimately would be responsible for handling their bugs and small changes within their own areas of code. We also looked at introducing some enabling teams, so SRE and DevX, who were really kind of our DevOps advocates within the business, and were ultimately responsible for helping the Streamlined teams to deliver value as efficiently as they could. At the time, we also created a platform team, which is our sort of membership management gateway, which provides services to each of the Streamlined teams, and was responsible for all of the interactions and APIs that allowed those streams to access our back-end membership management system. The mobile team in this diagram is grey here because at the time we weren't really sure which team topology it really fit into due to the way it was structured. So we've left that grey here, and just to demonstrate to you that it's a snapshot in time and these things do evolve. So it isn't set in stone, and it will evolve. So after defining those teams, what happened was that we moved into kind of a phase of really high collaboration, where each of those Streamlined teams were working closely with each other, really understanding the domain, who should consume what services, and that involved the majority of the teams. And then off of the back of that, we were able to identify the various X as a service interactions. So here we can see that our X as a service interaction is represented by the triangle, and the asterisks kind of denote which particular streams were consuming that X as a service. So we can see on this particular diagram that the payments team provided an X as a service via a platform, which was consumed by the acquisition team. We can also see here that the DevX and SRE teams were facilitating at this particular point in time the acquisition and gym teams, and the SRE teams were helping those particular teams with their CI/CD pipelines, infrastructure as code types of implementation. Once that evolved a little bit further, we started to have collaboration that was less frequent between certain teams. So as we can see here in the diagram, the gym team is collaborating for a short period of time with the mobile team. Maybe there was a new feature that cross-cut their concerns for each of those. So those couple of diagrams demonstrated how we kind of captured the shift from the monolith into the streams and the different platforms, and then how we utilized the diagrams to demonstrate how each of the teams were able to interact and to present a clearer picture of the new organizational structure. One of the other concepts that we made use of was the simple team APIs. So at the time, PureGym were using something called Confluence, which is a wiki page, and ultimately each of the Streamlined teams, or every team, were able to create their API, which defined exactly what their roles, their responsibilities were, what parts of the code they owned, and anyone that was new to the organization was kind of able to come in, go to that page and get a quick view of who to talk to or which particular area of the code that team was responsible for. We also introduced something called communities of practice. So we refer, these were introduced to provide a way in which different members with core interests or similar interests that was spread now across the different Streamlined teams. We're able to still engage on a regular basis, communicate and basically share good practice or have discussions around particular areas, whether that might be security, DevOps, or CMS and front end. So just as a recap of what we've been through and the concepts that we used from Team Topologies, we used fracture planes to look at how we could potentially split the code. We made sure that we took into account cognitive load when thinking about the team boundaries and what parts of the code each team should own. We used the interaction modes to kind of start to clarify how those teams should be interacting and working out whether the actions, the way in which they were working, matched the expectation of that particular team type and collaboration mode. And then our team types, streams and platforms, we use those to define the purpose for each team. So ultimately the results that we saw were that projects and BAU moved into the Streamlined teams with the platforms providing services. The separation of those services became clearer with better ownership, which ultimately led to us being more business responsive. There was more of a balanced ownership of those services, which meant that there was less cognitive load on individual teams, greater sense of autonomy, which ultimately then led to better morale and better longer term architecture. So with that, I'll hand you back to John to wrap us up.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, so in summary, Team Topologies helped us evaluate the relationships between our teams, business strategy, all with the goal of increasing team efficiency and moving away from our monolith to something that was more manageable and something that the cognitive load wasn't too much for the individual teams. The monolith was still the right decision at the beginning when we had a small team, but as the team grew and as the company grew, Team Topologies came to help us develop that into what was needed for the future. So what happened next? In early 2020, PureGym purchased Fitness World, and Fitness World is a fitness company based in Denmark, but also has operations in Switzerland as well. So PureGym IT now had to operate as part of a group. And with our Streamlined Teams matching the UK business, we've had to adapt and modify our processes. But the biggest thing in 2020, as most of you will be aware, was the pandemic. And this forced new ways of working, new processes, and rapid change. So early on in the pandemic, we did have to shut many of our gyms temporarily. We also had to put in new processes. We now allow people to access all of our gyms using our mobile app to reduce contact with the pin pads and things like that. And having this team structure in place allowed us to make those rapid changes in our software, which could then deliver value to our business and build confidence in our work. So that was 2020 and through into 2021. But it doesn't stop there. The role of Team Topologies and our organizational structure continues on as we grow as a team. We've put the foundations in place for a new architecture, breaking the monolith into micro sites and microservices. And we're going to continue to build on that as we build through the next generation of our platform. Personally, I've taken a different role now than when we implemented Team Topologies. I've taken more of an architecture enabling role, allowing a new department manager to take a lead on the team structure. And that concludes everything that we've done with Team Topologies. But as I said, it's a continuing journey and we'll continue to be using this as part of our work going forward. So if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to myself or Rich, and you can see examples on the Team Topologies website as well. Thank you.
This story begins in 2010. So in the 3 years running up to 2010, uSwitch made operating losses averaging about £4 million a year on tens of millions of pounds of revenue. We were not a small business. In 2006, Scripps had paid about £200 million for the company. And in 2010, software delivery practices were relatively modern. So practice continuous integration, blue-green deploys for graceful rollout of new features and services. And we were making releases every fortnight. But as you can probably guess, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough in 2010, and it is definitely not enough today. So my name's Paul. I'm the CTO at RVU, and we run uSwitch.com, as well as a couple of other sites as well that you can see across the bottom of the screen. And we help millions of people every month make better decisions on products that they need in their home. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk about our experience of applying the principles talked about in Team Topologies. So if we roll forward a little bit more recent to 2018, I wrote an article and published it on Medium about our adoption of Kubernetes, and in particular how we'd made some kind of significant scaling gains through the use of the APIs that Kubernetes offers. And as I wrote in that blog post, it's really important for us to recognize that we used Kubernetes to change our organization. We didn't change our organization to use Kubernetes. And this is an attempt to try and describe a bit about what was going on. So in the early days, we had maybe 2 to 3 people working on this platform team that were operating Kubernetes and building services and tooling around it. And they provided self-service APIs out to the different Streamline teams across the company. And all of that was in support of the team dynamics that we had become used to. So loosely coupled teams, high autonomy, focused on specific problems and outcomes, and in pursuit of fast flow, manageable cognitive load. And Kubernetes really helped with the abstractions and the APIs. So since about 2010, this became the kind of dominant model of software delivery within uSwitch, what we would call lean product development. So delivering software in small batches, looking at things in the order of hours and days, not weeks and months, from end to end, high levels of team autonomy, experimentation, and the feedback from those features is incorporated back into the kind of future direction of the product. And that's important because we want to learn quickly in a complex environment where cause and effect is not necessarily predictable. You only sense from doing. The other reason it's important is that, of course, we only gain value from the software and the features that we build when they're actually in the hands of people. So to be able to earn quickly, we also need to get things through the cycle very quickly. And those things help us minimize our investment risk. And I mentioned a bit about the uncertainty within product development. The previous cycle actually makes it look neat and tidy. It's actually a lot messier than that. One of the other interesting things is, so this is a research piece that came out of Microsoft, but it has been replicated in other businesses. Slack, Google, etc. I think have reported similar findings, which is that of all the experiments that they ran, only about 1/3 of those actually resulted in a successful outcome. So 2/3 of good ideas turn out to be not good ideas, and it's difficult to predict it. It's like the advertising adage, that 50% of your ad spend is making you money. You just don't know what that 50% is. So, I think this is a really huge deal. So how did we respond? Well, I think to a degree, this is what existed in 2010, right? So each blob is a different team, and you have handoffs between those teams. And I think this kind of thinking is still reasonably prevalent, right? It's difficult to make it work. In my experience, it seems to be the kind of starting point for most team development. People want to work with people like them. But of course, again, as you will remember from the opening slide, it wasn't working. So what has worked is, in the Team Topologies book, what is described as a streamlined team, right? So a cross-functional, multidiscipline team of people focused on end-to-end delivery across a value stream. So executing this cycle end-to-end, which is a mix of, data analysts, engineers, product designers, product managers. All of those people are part of that same team. So for uSwitch, our mission is to help consumers make better decisions. You can see, hopefully you can kind of see the fruits of our labor from the screenshot on the first slide. We help people through building better experiences that solve kind of genuine pain for people. It really is kind of marginal gains and continuous improvement in action. From a more internal view, we're a two-sided platform. So we have, on the supply side, we will have a broadband provider or an energy provider, and on the demand side, we have consumers. And then our Streamlined Teams are the teams in the middle that help connect those people together. We have more than those three teams, but those are kind of good archetypes to try and understand what's going on. And I think one of the other interesting things from this is recently I've heard charity majors from Honeycomb talk about how the act of fast delivery is itself motivating, right? The kind of gaining feedback on what works provides you with a kind of positive dopamine hit that encourages you to kind of keep moving more quickly and get more feedback. And so this worked great for 6 to 7 years, but we started noticing a problem with teams talking more and more about infrastructure. So this is a map to try and explain a bit about like how you would build a product, right? So to help people switch their energy, we might need a website. That website might use a service to help get prices, and the website and services might run on site, on top of Docker containers that run on top of Amazon's container service, etc. And then, of course, in the bottom right-hand screen, you can see all of the other stuff that Amazon provides. And so if you think of the Streamline Team setup, if the yellow blob represents all of the work that everybody was doing, you can see that there's a fair amount of stretch. And the high value work that teams should be focusing on is towards the top left, like the novel value creation that's directly solving customer pain. The stuff down the bottom right are things which we don't ideally want everybody to be having to get involved in. But the interesting thing actually was that we'd noticed that people were getting drawn into it. So people were reporting it in two ways. One, people were reporting doing more and more ops work. So Streamlined Teams were spending time doing operating system upgrades or changes to the security group setup because we made some org-wide change on how we wanted things configured. People were also reporting that new feature delivery was slower. So creating new services was more complicated because you now had to navigate load balances, security groups, networking, etc. So I actually, as a proudly data-driven person and organization, I wondered whether the AWS data that you can get access to would actually support that. So this is data from CloudTrail, which is, kind of Amazon's, audit, kind of audit log type service. And if you, this plots the number of services, like the breadth of services that people have to interact with. And these are only services which I would classify as the low level. So if you, again, on that map picture, the things at the very, very bottom. So things like, anything to do with like IAM policies or, kind of EC2, et cetera, things that we wouldn't expect people necessarily to have to get involved in. And I think it's a reasonably crude measure of cognitive load. And we'd seen that increase. So for about 50% of engineers, they'd seen that double over the course of just 2 years. And I think that's interesting when you then set that against the broader context, which is that Amazon and other cloud providers are gradually moving kind of up the value stack, right? So, Lambda at the top and then the kind of various container services underneath. So they're there to try and give application developers the building blocks that mean that they don't need to worry about, the underlying compute and so on. But what we'd actually noticed was that even though that was true, people were still having to interact with the underlying services. The data showed that people were still having to configure EC2, IAM, load balancers, networking. And this was a huge, this was starting to become a bottleneck on, kind of productivity. It was meaning new feature work was slow and, kind of operational load was higher than it needed to be. So another way of thinking about this is like, public goods and services, like almost like street lighting, right? So in our model, you've got some streamlined teams which are spending some of their investment on infrastructure, but none of them has an incentive to do anything other than just satisfy their need, right? So they're not going to end up with a kind of novel infrastructure. They're going to get just that, just what they need to survive. But as an organization in aggregate, we're actually spending more on infrastructure than we need to for subpar outcomes in each of those teams. And by that, I mean, it's, each team is spending time doing stuff more slowly because there isn't a team that can focus on it and make it work effectively. And so one of the reasons for extracting stuff out is it's not about, trying to get spend efficiency. We're trying to drive time to value. And I think the really wild thing about this is, as an organization, we can actually achieve a better outcome from a smaller investment by redesigning our organization. So again, as a reminder of how this actually kind of came to fruition or evolved a little bit over time, we had our platform team, which is now called Airship, which is responsible for a number of different capabilities and features that the other teams can then build upon. Those are provided as APIs into the different Streamline teams. The other thing that we've found work really well is using the enabling teams as a bit of a bridge between those two sides. So the enabling team help the Streamline teams, work effectively, solve problems that they need to. They also provide a bit of a conduit on product discovery back into the platform team. So they can kind of help share where the pain is and drive improvement within the platform. So if we go back to the map, this is, again, a simplified version, but it broadly tells the story, which is that for the Streamline teams, you're kind of keeping people up at the higher levels of abstraction and the kind of value creation that they should be focused on. The blue area represents really where we would expect platform teams to spend most of their kind of innovation and investment time. So we don't want people to, there's no need for us to be doing things that Amazon are doing, but by using the abstractions, it makes it possible for us to, to pull the whole organization across and then gradually hand more off to Amazon as Amazon commoditize things. So in the early days, EKS didn't exist. As soon as it was available, we could migrate people across because we'd done all of the other work. And that frees us up to then spend more time doing more interesting things. So the plot that showed increasing complexity, this shows the same data, but between 2015 and mid 2018. And you'll see that 50% trend line immediately kind of coming back down. And so again, for the majority of people in mid 2018, they were experiencing similar levels of complexity to that which existed in kind of early 2015. It's hard to understate the impact of the Accelerate book and the research from Dr. Forsgren and 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆 Kim that was published in this book. And their research showed that business outcomes were predicted by software delivery performance, and suggested a number of different measures that you could use to try and assess that. And again, in 2010, we had reasonably modern practices, but it wasn't enough. So, let's try and pull it up to date and look at how we've done. So, as I said at the start of the presentation, we were doing on the order of about 25 releases a year. So we're doing about one a fortnight, excluding like emergency bug fixes and other things that were going on. But in general, it was around about 25 releases a year. In the last month or so, we've actually had a couple of days where we've done nearly double that in a single hour of a single day. So in aggregate, that actually shakes out to around about a 700-fold increase in throughput, which is a remarkable difference in our ability to learn and iterate. That flows through to our revenue and operating profit performance. So as a business, we are looking to grow both revenue and operating profit. Over the period of 2010 to 2019, we've seen our revenue grow by 573%. That's 5 times more than the next best competitor. And operating profit has also increased a lot. That's actually increased by a factor of 10 more than the next best competitor. So for the majority of uSwitch's history, Team Topologies didn't exist, but the principles and the kind of knowledge and so on that Team Topologies describes are definitely familiar to us. And the language that Team Topologies provides us is super helpful now for trying to reason about and kind of give heuristics for how you make decisions. And those principles have helped us to accelerate and continue to accelerate our software delivery. And I would not be speaking to you now if it wasn't for these results. So thank you very much.